Hello, lovely learners. Welcome back to ALifeLearned. Today I have brought my friend Daphne on to share with me about her experience with PCOS, that is Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. Welcome, Daphne. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Becca. Thanks for having me.
So, would you like to start off by telling us a little bit about when you were first diagnosed with your condition?
Yeah, sure. So when I was 30, I had a really long period. It was about 35 days. And at that point, I was referred to a gynecological specialist. And she went over all my symptoms, and that's when I was diagnosed. But I have always had really terrible periods since I was 12.
That sounds awful.
It's not a great time, but so I've been on birth control since then.
Oh, wow. Okay, so most of your life then.
Yeah. At this point, it's more than half.
Wow. And how old are you now?
34.
Okay. So 4 years diagnosed.
4 years diagnosed. 4 years of treatment, but nothing's helping.
Nothing's helping. Oh, gosh. And so the reason we've brought Daphne on today is because this year has been a particularly special experience, we'll say, with the PCOS. Do you want to share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah, so like I said, I've been struggling with my period since I was a child. And so 30, I got the PCOS diagnosis. I've tried 6 different birth controls to control the bleeding, and nothing's really helped. We found a pill that we thought was helping. It's called a mini pill, so that just means it has less estrogen and no progesterone. And that was working, and I was totally regular. And then I got really sick in February, and I was hospitalized with pneumonia. And I don't know if that was a trigger. My doctors don't know either. But I've had my period every day since, and that is 170 days total so far.
Oh, we feel for her right now, right? Oh. So just to be clear, that's one of the reasons I was like, Daphne, let's get you on here to do an interview, because I've been following her Instagram where she's shared a little bit about her story. And with our current healthcare being the disaster that it is here in Ontario, it has been an extra special torture journey for her.
Yeah.
And so together we wanted to try and share with other people dealing with PCOS about how this experience is, what she's learned from it, and maybe little bits of advice that she could offer anyone dealing with the condition on, how to overcome the constant battle that women are facing, trying to get their health taken care of and just frankly get listened to by doctors.
Which feels impossible 90% of the time. I wasn't believed or anything until I was 30, and I finally got that PCOS diagnosis. I was always just told that, like, you're a woman and you have your period, suck it up. So
yeah, which is so condescending and so dismissive, and it's just like, okay, we won't even get into how frustrating that is. So it was February that this started then?
Yeah, so in February of this year, I was hospitalized for 3 days for influenza B, but it turned into pneumonia. And that's where the hospitalization came from. I had also had a lapse in memory from the fever. So when you're laid up in bed, they give you injections for blood clots. So I was given a blood thinner 2 times, the 2 nights that I stayed. And I had started my period 2 days prior to the hospitalization.
Okay.
And then with the blood thinner, it did get heavier, but I was like, duh, you're thinning my blood.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then it never stopped.
That is so scary.
Yeah.
So after that experience, once you got out of the hospital from that condition and recovered, when did you find yourself seeking treatment from a doctor, realizing the period was going too long?
Like the end of February, so it started the 7th. The end of February, I was like, this is getting excessive. The last time it was so long, that's when I saw a gynecologist. And so I called my family doctor, and he was able to get me in for March 15th. At that point, it was, I think, 35 days of bleeding.
Okay.
And so he referred me for an ultrasound and also put me on the list to be seen by my gynecologist again.
Okay. So at least they had something started.
Yeah. And we did blood tests to check for anemia and my iron levels.
Okay. And did he suggest any other medications at that time?
Yeah. So I did ask, because previously I've had this bleeding before, I asked for what's called tranexamic acid. Okay. And so that is something that causes your blood to clot. Okay. And so I had that, and I'd had success in the past, so I requested that. I did a full course of 10 days, and it didn't work. It didn't even slow it down. Oh. So I called him again and said, hi, this didn't work. What else can we try? And so he gave me naproxen, which a lot of people know as a anti-inflammatory, but it can also be used to treat bleeding in the uterus because it restricts blood flow there.
Okay.
It's the only organ it does that for. They don't really know why, but that's not something that you would like prescribe for any other stopping of bleeding other than uterine bleeding.
Okay.
So we did that, and it also didn't work, but it also caused me to break out into hives and be violently ill.
Oh my god, so allergic reaction on top of everything.
Essentially, yeah, so they can't call it that because I wasn't tested, but I did have an acute reaction, so I had to discontinue.
I'm sure that was frustrating.
Yes,
Getting
because it
sick
also
on top of sick.
didn't work either, and then plus the vomiting.
Okay, so then when did you first decide to go back to emergency while experiencing this ongoing period?
Yeah, so if you see me look down, it's just that I've written out a timeline because 170 days is a lot. So I did head back to Emerge on May 8th because I had hemorrhaged through my underwear at work.
Wow.
And so I had bled out on the floor, and I got really wheezy and nauseous, and I just said, like, enough's enough.
Yeah.
So I went to Emerge, and that was one of the worst days of my life. So when I first got there, I said, hi, can, and the other part was reception. She was also really dismissive. So I said, hi, I want to see a doctor. I've been bleeding for 90 days. And she said, 9 days? You want to see a doctor because you've been bleeding for 9 days?
Listen.
And I said, no, ma'am. 90. And she was like, 90 days? Like, she didn't believe me. And I was like, yes, yep, sure have. And so I went and I sat down, and then I thought, like, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and I'm going to see if they have any dispensers, because I'm going to need to take out cash then if it's, like, quarters, because who carries cash?
Yeah.
And there was nothing. There's not a dispenser to pay for, and there's no free menstrual products, which I believe should be as readily available as toilet paper.
Yes.
Because I don't choose to bleed, just like I don't choose to pee and poop. So I had to go to reception again. Excuse me, do you have any feminine hygiene products? What? Speak up. Can I please have a pad? And so they gave me one. And then I bled through it in less than an hour. Through my shorts, onto my dress.
Ugh.
Excuse me, can I have a pad? And they handed me one. And so I did that for 9 hours. And they would give me one pad at a time.
Wow.
And I would have to go up, and I would have to ask what I wanted. And then I would have to repeat what I wanted because they weren't listening, and they couldn't use context clues about the girl soaked in blood, what maybe I would want.
That must have been so frustrating.
Eventually my husband, so I did say he works at the hospital, he was present. At the end of his shift, he came and asked, like, do you need anything? Do you want anything? You've been here a really long time.
Yeah.
He wasn't allowed to wait in the waiting room with me because it was so full.
Wow.
So he did have to go home, but he brought me my own pack of pads. And at that point, I felt more relaxed. But this was, like, hour 8. So I had already gone through, like, 7 to 9 of their pads.
You'd worked a full-time job waiting in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Like, that's just next level.
There was a lady actively dying in the chair next to me, and no one was doing anything for her. And she had been sent down by her nephrologist, which is a kidney specialist, to be admitted because she was so poorly. And she was just actively getting worse for the 9 hours I was there, and actively dying. And on top of my own stuff, which I was like, ooh, I just had my period, like, I should go home. But I was told not to because I had fainted, and they needed to check my blood, and it was just the longest day of my life.
Yeah. And how did you feel when they finally took you back into the room?
I felt guilty at first because of the young lady next to me that was actively dying.
Yeah.
And then I felt relieved. I cried a lot, and then I was told to calm down. I was seen by a male doctor, and he started our conversation with, "You're not gonna like how this goes." And I said, okay, so we're fighting. Cool.
It's like they're trained to be assholes.
Exactly. So basically his thing was, yeah, you're bleeding, but because you're not bleeding to death, I can't help you. So his course of action was to prescribe me the 2 medications that I had already had in March that didn't work and that I had a reaction to. But because the reaction wasn't noted on my file, and it's not an official allergy, he wouldn't negate it. He's like, but you didn't try transexamic and naproxen together. So he gave me both, I was instantly nauseous, had to get Zofran intravenously. Zofran's like liquid Gravol, but like times 100.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I was just dismissed. I was discharged with a list of symptoms to look out for. I had every single symptom on the list, and so I handed it back to him and I said, "Hi, I have all of these. I'd like to be admitted." And he said, "No." So that list would be if you are worsening.
And did they give you a reason for why they said no?
Yeah, like I'm not dying. So I wasn't bleeding to death. I was just anemic at that point. And so they said, just go home and rest up.
So because she was replacing her blood, but yet literally technically didn't have enough blood, anemic, they qualified that as we don't need to treat you.
Yeah.
This is the state of Ford's healthcare right now. Just need to highlight that. A lot of people don't really want to talk about politics when it comes to stuff like this, but I'm sorry. If you're a woman, your life is political.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is,
It
right?
is.
Especially when you're trying to seek healthcare, especially when you have conservatives trying to tell you the whole time, not only do you not have any say over your body, but you're having health issues, we don't believe you because
doesn't
you're a
matter.
woman. It's disgusting. I just want to say I'm disgusted for the treatment that you've had.
So I'm disgusted as well. I do want to say, though, my husband works at our local trauma center here in town. I value the employees. I don't value, except for that doctor, he can
go
somewhere.
Yeah.
But I do value, I had very kind nurses. I'm a hard poke, which means like it's hard to get blood from me.
Oh, okay.
And then I was anemic, so like my veins were completely flat.
Oh, that's hard.
So I cried a lot. And they were very comforting. They didn't other than the one nurse who told me to calm down because I was like hyperventilating, trying to explain what was going on.
Yeah.
Everybody was very kind. So it's not the people, it's the politics, 100%. There's crazy wait times too. Like when I said in March, I saw my doctor, he also prescribed me or gave me a requisition for an ultrasound. Well, that ultrasound that was March 15th, wasn't going to be until April 2nd.
Okay.
I unfortunately was seeking treatment for, I also am type 2 diabetes. That's all part of the comorbidities of PCOS.
Oh, okay.
I was seeking treatment in Windsor for that.
Okay.
It conflicted with my ultrasound appointment. So then I had to cancel that ultrasound appointment in April, and they told me my next available was July.
Ooh.
Unless I would leave the city. And so that's what I did. I had an ultrasound appointment in St. Thomas at a private clinic. OHIP still covered it.
Okay.
But they just don't have like the same communication system, I guess, between doctors.
Oh.
So it was a lovely clinic. I had a male tech. That was the only way I could do it without having to wait again. So that was a little bit uncomfortable because it is an internal ultrasound. They do insert a probe.
Okay.
But at that point, I was like, get this over with. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'll show you everything. So
we'll get naked if we got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he was very kind, and that was the only way I could get the ultrasound was to go to a private clinic because all of the OHIP government-run clinics were 2 months out.
We're overrun. And so, in that sense, how would you speak about OHIP going to private clinics right now?
I'm grateful that OHIP still covered the procedure. I was and am at a point where I would pay for treatment.
Okay.
I'm annoyed at Ford for pushing for private, though.
Yeah.
It would affect my husband's job.
Right.
It would affect our health care.
Yeah.
I believe wholeheartedly in universal health care.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's disgusting that I had to go private.
Because that's how much he has, sucked dry our current system.
resources.
He's forcing people to think that private healthcare is better when it's actually, it's our only option sometimes.
It's our only option.
How is it better when you literally don't have other options?
Exactly. And then also because I was seen in Emerge, they did offer to see me the next day again in Emerge for an ultrasound, but they did say I would have to wait the full wait time to see a doctor to read the results.
That's nuts.
So that could have been 8 to 10 hours. He couldn't tell me when. I'd get the ultrasound right away, but then I would be sitting in the waiting room the rest of the time. And I work.
Yeah, we have lives, right?
So that didn't work for me, so I kept my appointment for 2 days later, because I was like, you know what, it's 2 days.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, I had a very, very kind ultrasound tech.
That's good.
He was great. he did at the end of the appointment say, since you've been going through this for so long, I'm going to put a rush on this.
Great.
Which was great at the time. I thought, you're so kind. But then you spiral because you're like, what did you see?
You're scared.
I'm scared. But they were great, and they did put a rush on it. So a radiologist is who reads all of your medical imaging. He read it, and he sent me the report. But then I was silly, and I opened the report alone at work the next day.
Uh-oh.
And it showed a mass.
Okay.
But I didn't have anybody to read me the results. None, my family doctor, my gynecologist, they were all going to be later.
Right.
So then I had to spiral until I could see someone about this undescript mass in my uterus.
Terrifying, right? Because that ultimately could have meant cancer.
Yeah.
Like, a mass could be a lot of different things. I remember when Daphne shared with me that they had found the mass, and I immediately started freaking out. I was like, okay, well, we're crossing fingers and toes and everything we got. We're crossing legs and arms. Like, oh my God, please don't let it be cancer. That's so scary. That's like a thing on top of a thing on top of a thing, right? But what did they end up finding the mass was?
So it's called a uterine polyp, or just a uterine mass.
Okay.
It is right now taking up 3/4 of my uterus. The mass is the size of a 10-week fetus. And my uterus is the size as if I were 12 weeks pregnant.
Holy, wow.
Yeah, it's taking up a lot of space.
Uncomfortable, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And the key here is that Daphne has not volunteered to get pregnant. Daphne has not done anything to cause this.
No, I will add, I'm happily married, but we are child-free by choice. And pregnancy is not on my list of things I want to do.
Exactly. And that's a whole other thing when it comes to our healthcare, is trying to have a doctor recognize that you want to stay childless is almost impossible until you hit either like 50 or you've had babies.
Yeah.
Like, the only way they will let you consider a hysterectomy is if you've already had children, and they'll even insist on talking to your partner.
Yeah.
Before they will let you move forward with the procedure. But will they do that with men? Do men have to talk to their wives to get themselves tied? No, not at all. So this is just a whole other thing that Daphne's been facing. So after they found out that it was a mass, what was the next step?
So because I went to Emerge, that also triggered seeing my gynecologist earlier. So originally when I'd seen my family doctor in March, my gynecological appointment was going to be September.
Okay.
Because she's a specialist, and because I specifically wanted my old gynecologist who diagnosed me with PCOS. She knew my family history, she knew my history, she knew what was important to me and my values. I wanted to see her, and with that comes a wait. And again, that is the Ontario healthcare system pushing doctors out of the province. But again, that's politics. So it was going to be September. But going to Emerge, the one good thing that doctor did was he did put me on the emergency gyno list.
Okay, great.
And my doctor saw that get flagged. My personal gyno, she saw it, and so she offered to see me sooner. And she was able to see me 2 weeks post ultrasound.
Great.
And my family doctor also called me because he was the referring doctor. He gets the results as well.
Okay.
He was able to call me and do an over the phone, hey, it's not cancer. So it still wasn't 100% that it wasn't, but just that he gave me the stats. So 5% of uterine polyps are cancerous, especially in my age demographic. It's even a little bit lower. Okay. But to not panic. Okay. And that when I saw the gynecologist, I would get more options for testing the mass. Okay. So 2 weeks later, I saw Dr. Sovereign, my gynecologist. She's amazing. And she broke it down for me, gave me the same stats, and then did an in-office biopsy.
Do you guys know what a biopsy is?
So a uterine biopsy is the worst, and I will never, ever, ever do it again, but hopefully I won't have to. So they insert a pipette. Well, first they insert the speculum, and they open your vagina, and then they use a teneculum, which is like a little hook, and they hook that into the meat of your cervix to hold it in place. Oof. And then she feeds a pipette, which is just basically a big long straw. It was about this long. Yep. And it has a little tiny sharp hole on the end. So what she would do is she opened the speculum, she hooked my cervix, and then she inserted the pipette. And then she spun the pipette for a count of 10, to scrape the lining of my uterus, hopefully nick the polyp, but it was so big there was no way she was going to miss it, and then extract. So although it was 10 seconds, it was the longest 10 seconds of my life.
Like, we need to note that Daphne was not, like, she didn't get any numbing agent.
No.
She didn't get any, like, meds to deal with the pain before.
I didn't know the procedure was happening.
So there was basically no warning. She walks into this appointment thinking that she's going to have an ultrasound read to her, and then ends up learning that she gets to actually have a scalpel, a mini tiny microscopic scalpel, just circled around in her cervix instead.
Yeah, like a big cheese grater.
Ah!
And it was the worst day. I didn't know I was having the procedure, like Becca had said. I just knew that I was going to get my results, and then maybe we would be scheduling a procedure.
Yeah.
There's a couple different procedures you can have done when you have polyps. One's called hysteroscopy, where they go in with a camera, and then they'll nick the polyp, or they'll completely remove the polyp. But instead, she decided to just do the biopsy because I told her I don't want children.
Okay.
So when we started the appointment, she said, "What are your conception goals?" And I said, "They are 0. And I had brought my husband in case she was like, "Well, talk to your partner." She never did, thankfully. She's a feminist for sure.
Okay, there you go.
She is very forward, but I didn't know what was required of her either. Mm-hmm. So I brought him. He was like, "Do whatever you want." Mm-hmm. So he sat with me, and he was a major support. But she said, like, "What do you want to do? Do you want to have babies?" And I said, "Please, God, no. Please remove my uterus. Yeah. I'm done. It's never served me well. Mm-hmm. It's, to me, no more useful than an appendix at this point. I don't want it.
Yeah.
And if we could remove it, that would be great." So if I had plans to keep my uterus, we would do the hysteroscopy.
Oh, okay.
Because then I would get treatment, I'd get the polyp removed, and then we'd move towards conception.
Okay.
But because I'm not going to use it, there's no point in going through that procedure and then also going through a hysterectomy.
Right, okay.
So we did the biopsy to rule out cancer, and then she put me on the hysterectomy list. Thank God.
Yeah, because again, women have to fight like tooth and nail to get that procedure done when they haven't had children. And you can even, if you're not partnered and you want to get a hysterectomy, they'll fight you even harder.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, "Well, you don't even have a partner for us to ask yet, but you might meet one." And so just, I feel for you in the sense of the fight that you've been constantly up against.
Yeah, so I did when she agreed to the hysterectomy. So it was very, like, abrupt. "What are your conception goals?" And I said, "I don't have any. We don't want kids. I'm done." She sat right down and started drawing the pictures of how to do a hysterectomy.
Nice.
And then I just lost it. I started bawling my eyes out because it was so much
You felt hurt?
relief.
Yeah.
That I was finally getting what I've wanted. I've wanted a hysterectomy since I was 18.
Yeah.
I've known my whole life I don't want children. I was never a little girl who dreamed of that. Mm-hmm. And then being on birth control at such a young age and being miserable, and it's something I've always wanted, but I never thought I was going to get.
Yeah.
I'm not happy that it's taken this period from hell to be seen and heard and get what I want as an end goal.
Yeah.
But it was so much relief in the moment that I just broke down.
Yeah, gotta feel your feelings sometimes, right? So in this time, we're talking like basically, so it would be February to May.
Yeah.
How many doctors do you think you ended up seeing about this ongoing period?
So I saw 2 emergency room doctors, and I saw my family doctor and a gynecologist.
4 doctors. 4 doctors to get herself heard. And the one that finally heard her was the gynecologist. Are we surprised?
No.
No. Because, I mean, honestly, and I've heard of this, when there are male gynecologists out there, I'm a little bit like, I think you're a little outside of your
scope
realm,
of practice,
dude. Like, you literally don't know what it means to have a uterus.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I'm really glad to hear that you had a kind male technician.
I did, yeah. So the ultrasound tech, he was amazing. He was very kind. Like I said, it was a little bit awkward. You're laying up, your legs are apart, and he's like, "I'm going to insert it now." And you're just like, it's wearing a condom and it's got lube on it, and it can feel icky. Mm-hmm. But there's a woman in the room with you. Okay. It's law. So if a male is going to be performing an intimate procedure, then there has to be another woman in the room. It's not just something you request, it's the law.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
So that's something to advocate for yourselves. Always. If you're ever in that situation and it's going to be an intimate, your breasts are exposed, any genitalia, You can request a woman, but it should be offered to you.
Like, they should just know that that's law.
Yeah.
Okay, so after that terrible experience, where she was frankly as gentle as she could be, but awful procedure, how long did it take to get your results?
So 2 weeks, because again, she's so busy, she's so bogged down with patients.
Yeah.
It was 2 full weeks of waiting and hoping that it was clear. Of course, like, I knew the risks, and I knew that they were pretty minimal, but, like, it's still in the back of your head. It still eats away at you.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it was negative for cancer, so I am clear.
Yeah.
It's just a benign polyp. So it's just a mass of tissue that has collected and gathered in my uterus, and it is also more than likely the cause of the bleeding as well. So my uterus is trying to shed that and free me from it,
Okay.
and it's not detaching.
And so that's why you keep bleeding.
That's why I keep bleeding.
Okay, and so you're saying that this period started in February?
Yeah.
Has it stopped at all?
So I've had 6 days without bleeding.
Of relief between February and now?
Yeah.
Now being the
July.
end of July?
Yeah.
Wow. And she got 1 week of relief when the period itself is supposed to be 1 week.
Yeah.
Just a little context there, guys. So the ultimate story here is that Daphne experienced pretty extreme symptoms from Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, which they know she has, and then she experienced waiting, invalidation, discrimination, waiting.
Yeah.
Like, so this isn't just a story of women fighting for their basic human rights. This is Ontarians fighting for some basic health care. Like,
we were all commiserating in the waiting room. Like, you're with hundreds of people.
Yeah.
They're coming in and out. There were some unhoused folks, and you could tell that they were frequent flyers is what they're called, but security knew them by name. What are you here for? Let's get you registered. Like I said, there was that lady beside me who was actively dying from kidney failure. She actually, her family ended up calling an ambulance for her to be taken to another care facility because of the lack of care she was receiving at our trauma center, a tier 1 trauma center. Another lady that was sitting with us, she had fallen off of a ladder painting, and her shoulder looked visibly disformed.
okay.
She clearly broke it. She was waiting, and I understand that someone with a broken arm is not as serious as, say, a gentleman who maybe came in with stroke symptoms.
Sure.
But she's sitting for 8 hours in the waiting room. She could have at least gotten her x-ray done.
Something.
And that didn't happen either.
Yeah.
And I know my husband, that's the department he works in, he'll often take the patients back once he gets the paperwork, and then, oh, I'm sorry, you'll have to go back out and sit in the waiting room. But at least by the time they see the doctor, the images are uploaded, their blood work's uploaded. It's a quick, like, this is what we're going to do, treat you, and then discharge. Instead, she was going to sit there for 8 hours, and then she was going to sit in the back room in a chair for another hour or 2, then get sent for an x-ray, then see the doctor for the results, and then see treatment. And I just think there's better ways to do it. Obviously, I'm not a hospital CEO.
No.
But it just felt so ridiculous that we were all just sitting there doing nothing. When I first went through triage, I did get blood work right away, but then it had been so long that they had to redo my blood work anyway.
So, like, they're literally wasting money because of their wait times. Meanwhile, these wait times are the result of them not having enough funding in order to hire enough staff, in order to serve people. Oh, our system is a mess. So, above all, I just want to thank you so much for sharing this story with me, because not only is this an incredibly awful saga of PCOS, it is an awful saga of Ontario healthcare, of women's healthcare, of advocating for your healthcare, and it's an important story I think people need to hear, just about like how a strong woman, sophisticated, capable woman is left being frankly quite unproductive, sitting in a wait room when she'd rather be at work, because people won't hear her on her symptoms, because even women are dismissing her in the hospital setting. And you know what? I'm not even going to blame that receptionist. She's probably overworked because of our fucking broken system, right? And that's the big thing here. But one of the things I really wanted to highlight about this is just how under-recognized PCOS is. A lot of people will go till 30 without quite recognizing that they have the condition, because people, they're like, they feel discriminated against by doctors, so they won't explore their own healthcare further, because it's all just more and more stress. So all that in mind, considering
Yeah.
your own experiences and what a like strong, independent woman you've clearly shown yourself to be,
Yeah.
do you have any tips or advice that you would offer someone with PCOS? First, just in general, managing the condition, and then second, trying to navigate the Ontario health system.
Yeah, so like everybody with a chronic illness will always say you're your own best advocate, and that's always true. Listen to your body. Nobody knows your body better than you. If something's out of the ordinary, don't just dismiss it as like this is a bad day or this is a bad week. Listen to it, track it, keep it in mind, and don't be afraid to call and go back and go back and go back. And that's eventually what helped me. Was I called my family doctor and I said, this is ridiculous. I've been on birth control and it's not helping, and now I have all these new symptoms, and it took a lot to be seen, and it did take a lot for myself reflectively too, because women's healthcare and health is such a diminished entity.
Yeah.
That I was like, I can't complain about my period. Every woman in the history of time has had their period. Get over it, you're fine.
That's what you're told.
Yeah.
Which is not fair.
I do still feel that way some days. When I call in sick to work, I'm calling in sick because of my period. Like, that's what's going through my head. And I know that it's not. It's the anemia, it's the nausea, it's the faintness. It's that I'm actively bleeding through every pair of pants I put on.
Yeah.
I logically know that. But consciously,
emotionally,
in my conscience, it's hard to separate the two.
Yeah.
To understand that you're not being a big baby about it.
You're respecting your needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a hard one in particular. Ultimately, it comes down to respecting your body and your needs, right? And I guess that's the message with this whole video is, if you've had a really long period, I'm going to leave some links below just to leave you a little bit of learning about PCOS. It has a lot of different symptoms. It's not just long periods.
I did want to touch on PCOS is actually a misnomer as well.
Okay.
So you can have Polycystic Ovary Syndrome without having any cysts on your ovaries.
Okay.
So I went most of my life without a cyst. They do think I have one that ruptured in 2020 just because of the extreme pain I was in. They thought it was kidney stones. They thought it was a blood clot.
Okay.
They looked a little bit closer at my ovaries. There appeared to be a ruptured sac.
Okay.
But it's a category of illnesses. So it's hairtourism, which means excess facial hair growth or growth of hair on your body.
Okay.
It's acne.
Okay.
It's, so there's like 4 main criteria. Weight in your belly that you can't shed.
Okay.
Cysts on your ovaries. Irregular periods and hairtourism.
Okay.
And you only need 3 of the 4 criteria to be PCOS positive.
Okay.
And it's a hormonal thing.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to have this hysterectomy, that's not going to cure my PCOS.
Okay.
It's going to stop the bleeding, which is my main complaint, my main symptom of PCOS for me.
Mm-hmm.
I might be able to go off my birth control, but if the hairtourism gets really bad and I'm self-conscious about facial hair, I might have to go back on birth control.
Okay.
Because it's controlling my hormones, not my uterus.
Okay.
My ovaries are fine right now. They're functioning. I ovulate. We don't know how often because I'm never not bleeding. But I would need assistance to have children if that's the path we wanted to take.
Okay.
It's not, so I don't care.
Thank God, yeah.
They would track my ovulation in that case.
Okay.
And then I would know more about it, but it's not... The irregular periods were the main symptom that sent me.
Yeah.
But cysts were not on my radar at all.
Okay. And so just a thing to keep in mind is it's not just long periods. That certainly seems to be the horror show that Daphne's been facing lately.
And it's not just trouble to conceive either.
There's a lot of aspects to it. And you can conceive is the point with this condition. It's not a black and white be all or end all. But more than anything, just, learn about your body, trust your body, do a little reading. If you're suspicious of having the condition, check out the links I have in the comments or in the description, where you can learn a little bit more about, various different studies and the different symptoms as Daphne was describing, and just talk to your doctor if you're suspicious. More than anything, I know as a woman, or as someone who's trying to advocate for a woman, that it's hard to advocate for our healthcare. It's hard to just keep, as Daphne was saying, keep coming back and keep coming back. Because every time you get shot down, your motivation and will to keep going is a little bit eroded, right?
Yeah, you feel smaller and smaller.
Exactly.
You feel more and more invisible.
And that's not okay. But I guess what I'm trying to say with this is, if you're feeling like you're having a hard time continuing to go back, reach out for help. Reach out to people like myself. Reach out to your friends and your family and say, hey, I'm not being listened to, but I need help because I know that this is a problem and they're not listening to me.
And ultimately, I took my husband with me to that appointment to see the gynecologist as a support. And he is on board with anything that I want to do. He's my biggest advocate. He's my rock. But I have that in my corner, and I know not a lot of people do, but there are resources, your local health unit, they're great resources, great places to start. But if you have anybody in your corner, even just to hold your hand while you're sitting there.
Yeah.
I wanted him there as my grounding, and to also pipe up and say, no, I don't want kids either, please just listen to her. But it was just nice to have someone in the room. If he couldn't have came, I would have brought my mom, because again, she is another good support that I have, and I know that I'm blessed and privileged in that. And not everybody has it, but the resources are out there. And even just reach out to a friend or an acquaintance. Like Becca and I, we're not best friends. We've known each other for a long time, but I know that she is someone I could come to if I was lacking a support system.
Exactly. So the whole idea in this is you're not alone.
No.
Just please try to remember the systems are broken, and the way that doctors treat women is toxic, and we have a lot of work to do in that area. But the main message here is you are not alone.
No.
So final question for you. Do you have any advice for women in Ontario or Ontarians in general in trying to navigate our very broken healthcare system?
The sooner you seek attention, the sooner you'll be seen. If you're not feeling good and you're putting it off, just know that that's longer that it's going to take to see a specialist too.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're thinking like, I can tough it out for the next 2 weeks, maybe it'll go away. By the time you see a doctor, it could be 3 months. And can you wait the 3 months, or should you just start the ball rolling now?
Yeah.
And the other part is, like, seek out a family doctor. I know they're hard to find. Don't be afraid of going to the walk-in clinic. I've heard of family doctors that charge their patients or threaten their patients when they go to a walk-in clinic because OHIP will charge your family doctor.
Yeah.
Don't listen to them. Urgent care is a resource for you. It's there for you to use if you need to be seen urgently. I'm not saying if you have a sore throat you should go, but definitely if it's something that needs care and your primary physician is a 2-week appointment out, go to urgent care.
Yeah.
That's why they're there. Stay away from Emerge unless it is something very serious, because you're going to sit and you're going to wait. And then you're going to be miserable, and everybody around you is going to be miserable, and that's not a good time. I would have gone to urgent care had they been open, and went to urgent care first. Because their hours are until 3, and my episode happened around like 1, but they had already taken all the patients they could allot for the day. And they said if I ended up needing a blood transfusion, that's not something they could do there because I might need to be admitted. So then I was sent to Emerge. I would not have chosen Emerge.
Yeah.
So also give like a good conscious thought about the type of care you need to be seeking.
Yeah.
Try your family doctor first, they're your best resource, and then try urgent care and Emerge. Emerge should always be your last resort, though.
Okay, so the key here to note is that we do have a lot of communities that have an urgent care facility. So that is, a lot of people tend to think as urgent care and emergency as the same. At least in London, we can say that they're not. We have St. Joseph Hospital is urgent care, so that is like, I'm in a situation where I really need care and I can't get into my family doctor. Emergency is the word itself. Like, you need to be admitted right now. You have broken bone. You have...
Urgent care can do broken bones as well.
Can they? Okay.
They can.
Okay, that's good to know.
But yeah, you're bleeding out. You need, like, stitches, urgent care. But amputation... Emergency. It should be something where Emerge is your last... It's the middle of the night and your baby spiked a fever of 104. Emergency.
Yeah.
You have a fever of 101. It's the middle of the afternoon. Urgent care.
Yeah, so it's nowhere to send yourself, basically, because you will have a worse wait in emergency.
And
so you don't want to...
experience.
And you don't want to go that way if you don't have to. But the ultimate message is don't put your health care off.
No.
We aren't in a country where you have to pay for everything.
No.
It is a bit of a mess, right? But because we do have certain coverage, it is always good to prioritize your health. It's
Yes.
very important that even if you're looking at an incredible wait time, that you start that wait time now instead of when you are in emergency, because then maybe you'll be that woman sitting beside Daphne with a failing liver that they still don't take in.
Yeah.
We don't want you in that situation is the kind of the message. So anyways, thank you so much
Thank
again,
you.
Daphne. I really appreciate you sharing your story with me. If anyone has any questions for Daphne, I'm happy to forward them her way, so feel free to load those down in the comments below. And otherwise, please join me again next week or sometime soon where I try again to share a little something I've learned or my friends have learned and experienced in life.